Welcome, innovators, business owners, entrepreneurs, technology experts, academia, government R&D communities, and members of the North Carolina innovation ecosystem. This is Defense Technology Talks, hosted by the North Carolina Defense Technology Transition Office, or NC DEFTECH. This podcast will showcase various technologies with local and national experts who aim to solve complex national security problems. In the coming weeks, we will highlight North Carolinians with the potential to, or those that have positively contributed to enhancing the capabilities of our warfighters, law enforcement, and first responders. We will also feature government leaders in research and development who have helped shape the future in this domain. These podcasts are just one of the many free services provided by the North Carolina government to assist the North Carolina innovation ecosystem to thrive and provide solutions to our nation. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rob Robinson with the North Carolina Defense Technology Transition Office. I have Bull Holland here. He is from a company called BMNT, but I don't want to talk too much about it because I want him to kind of give his backstory and tell us a little bit more about the company. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Bull. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah. Hey, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So the short version is I'm a teacher. The longer version is I'm a recovering Army acquisition officer. And so I've been through multiple jobs. I was teaching when I was on active duty. I was teaching as a support contractor. I was teaching when I was a GS employee at Army Research Labs, and now I'm teaching at BMNT. So the jobs rotate, but the teaching stays. Right? So that's what I do. BMNT is a Silicon Valley consultancy that really focuses on how to solve problems for public sector. DoD is our biggest client, but we work with Fortune 100 companies as well. Now, that's what the rest of the company does. What I do is I teach. So I kind of got here because I was teaching a class called Hacking for Defense that BMNT originated. It's now at 60 universities around the world, had maybe 65-ish startups come out of the class. And so I was teaching that to grad students at NC State. I'm an adjunct at NC State. And I really enjoyed that. Students were great. What I really wanted to do was teach soldiers, right? And so I found a way. It finally occurred to me, like, hey, man, you're a GS employee. You can do this for free. So I did. So I started teaching soldiers from the 82nd and the 101st. And I took that graduate education and I brought it into something that was more applicable to what they need. And our CEO, Pete Newell, we'd communicated over the years, and he brought me up to the office and said, well, hey, what do you want to do, Bull? And I said, I still want to change the Army. He said, well, why don't you do it here? Yeah. And so I went from the government to BMNT. And I'll tell everybody I'm a teacher. My actual title is the Director of Education and Training for BMNT.
Wow, that's fabulous. And one of the things that, we really start rolling early before we even started the call, and that's always great because, there's a really good connection there. But one of the things that people have to understand is, coaching, teaching, and mentoring is the most difficult part of any endeavor that's out there. And now imagine trying to build a business while you're trying to learn the culture of the military. The Department of Defense is a unique beast. And even, those of us that serve in it, there's people that have, made it 30, 40 years, but they never had to deal with logisticians because they were the commander, or they were always somewhere where they didn't have to deal directly one-on-one with the loggies. And so their perception of how things get done in the military is completely different from the person that's day in, day out doing the logistical support for an operation. And you run into guys that have spent a lot of time in special operations, and that's a completely different, mindset from a conventional guy versus a person that's in a training organization. And at the end of the day, it's all about accomplishing the mission, but there's different flavors of how you get there. And, it sounds like you guys have a program that would be very, very helpful. So it sounds like the government problem that you're trying to solve is how to teach people to communicate effectively across the domains. But, could you elaborate on kind of what you guys are teaching at BMNT?
Yeah, I think that's pretty close, right? So what I teach is about innovation and entrepreneurship, and I focus on the public sector. Look, if you want to go learn how to be an entrepreneur, and you're going to work in the commercial sector, there's a lot of better places to go get that kind of knowledge than what I can give you, right? IDEO is a great example. Wonderful programs online. You can go out to San Francisco and get education from them as well. And you can go to any major university in the country and get all kinds of entrepreneurship and innovation training opportunities. North Carolina State, I think, has 25 different programs, and they're exceptional. The problem is that E6 down at Fort Liberty doesn't have the time or money to go do that. So how do we democratize that innovation and entrepreneurship training so that next future leader has the opportunity to consume that knowledge and take it to the next level? And that's what we do, right? We take those concepts, those principles that apply equally between the public sector and the private sector. Well, the principles are the same, but the applications are grossly different. I'll give you a quick example of what I mean. Most everybody's seen Stranger Things, one of the most streamed shows of all time. The Duffner brothers pitched that 50 times before it got picked up. And that's how entrepreneurs become successful entrepreneurs in the commercial world. You make a pitch, you get told no, but you learn something. You make a pitch, you get told no, but you learn something. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's how you grow. Well, I know how it was when I was in the Army. I'm just going to guess that when you were in the 82nd, if one of your subordinates came to you and said, hey, I've got this great idea, and you said no, and they took it to somebody else, you'd call that insubordination.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair.
And so our service members do not have the same mechanism to learn. So what we found is the way they can get those repetitions, because that's how we all learn, is through repetition, is through education. And so we build our classes around the idea that you bring in a problem, I give you methodologies to solve it, but then you get out of the building to go engage with human beings and learn about how to apply what I'm teaching you. Mm. That's where your repetitions come from. So that's really the essence of what we do. We focus on the lean startup methodology. And I take that, and what we really do is, so I'll tell people, like, I'm not a salesman. I have some classes I teach, but I'm not here to convince you that those classes are right for you. I'm a blacksmith. I know my area. My PhD's in engineering management. I've been studying management theories for 20 plus years. So when you come to us and you say, this is what we need, if you're in my space, public sector innovation, I can help you understand, do you need to go all the way back to Rogers and diffusions of innovations theory, or do you need to go back to Christensen, God rest his soul, and disruption theory, or anything in between? So we try and bring that bespoke nature that BMNT has always been great at for consulting into education so that we got the right information to the right person at the right time.
Yeah, that's perfect. And again, that's all part of it too. It's, you can say luck and timing, but luck is really where opportunity meets, your skills that you've been developing for so many years. And that's one of the difficulties that a lot of people can't see when they're in the fight. When you're in the uniform, again, the biggest advantage that you have from being out is like, yeah, I can help the Army. You know why? Because I know your problem sets. It doesn't change as frequently or as drastically as everybody would want it to. That's the first part. But the other part of it is we know that it doesn't change as frequently as people assume, because the Army is a big old boat. But if you understand how palm cycles work, it takes 7 years for anything to happen, right?
Yeah, man.
And so it becomes a big, huge part of the discussion is, how do I make myself attractive to that organization? And one of the things that the drum that I'm starting to beat right now is hey, we've got to get away from programs of record in the military and get to capabilities of record in the military. And the reason why I say that is because program of record is attached to some big, huge, monolithic, multi-billion-dollar company. A capability of record can be down the street with a bunch of guys that just recently retired that are cutting their teeth in the small business space, and they have a very unique idea, but the barriers to entry are so thick to get those guys in front of the customer that those guys are like hoping that they can keep the lights on in that first year or 2 years until they can build their brand a little bit more.
Now you got it. One of the challenges we have in DoD, we're actually pretty good at building and managing programs. And I know we like to throw a lot of stones, and there's good reason for that. But overall, we're pretty good. What we're not good at is building companies. Mm-hmm. And that's what the entrepreneurship world does. That's what venture capitalists do. They don't invest in projects. They invest in teams. Mm-hmm. And we don't have the skill to do that in DoD, quite frankly, for some pretty good reasons. Because when you start investing in companies instead of in projects, you really bring in a lot of opportunity for corruption. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing the system cannot tolerate. So, you've always got to think about, how are we making sure that we have the right checks and balances in place so that we don't have people making decisions for, themselves instead of what's best for the government. And so there's still a sweet spot in between there from where we are to where we need to be. It's just we're never going to be able to say we should be like venture capital firm X. Yeah. Because we rightfully have some constraints they shouldn't. So it's I always like to remind myself, as much as I like to rage against the machine, the people in there are patriots doing the best they can with what they got. And a lot of those things are there for.
That's fair. And I think one of the big things that I always see is it's just like we need to be able to accelerate when we need to accelerate. It's kind of like I'll use it as in terms of a football team, right? Like the greatest running backs that we've ever watched in college or even professional football, those are the guys that can see the field. And when they have that opportunity, they make it happen, and that's, I think that's the easiest way. And it's very cliche to use that example, but I mean, that's something that's relevant to a large audience is like, hey, look, when Barry Sanders saw that spot on the field that he needed to get to, he got to it. And that's what innovation is about. It's not just, oh, hey, I have this big, huge monolithic problem that I have to figure out. Yeah, everybody's got a wicked problem. How do I get to a solution? And that's one of those things I think is lost on some people because I was a fight to the yes kind of guy, right? So if my boss said, hey, we've got to do this. So it's like, okay, we're charting this thing out and it's like, hey, boss, this is the yes answer. However, these are the opportunities and this is the risk that you're going to be assuming to get to that yes. We can always say no. Like saying no is easy, but fighting to a yes is a very, very difficult way of getting people to understand it because it also takes the shackles of your own mental, your own mental blocks, whatever the task is, it gets them out of the way. Like, hey, we're going to get to yes, but we just got to chart it out and make sure that we understand it. And one of the other parts that, gentleman much wiser than me said, one of the things that the Army is great at is we're always great at starting or picking fights, but managing them and ending a campaign is just as difficult. So like in the entrepreneur realm, it's like, yeah, it's easy to start a business. You can file for $200 and get an LLC today, right? The difficulty is, how do I build something that's of enough interest to either get me acquired or become, there's only 6 companies that succeed, right? We talk about that. Of the 10 companies that are presented, 6 of them are going to succeed. 3 of them you'll never see again because they're going to hit a certain threshold and then they're just going to get sucked up by one of these bigger companies. And then you've got those 3 that are game changers, right? If you told me 30 years ago that, Steve Jobs was going to build a computer in his garage that was going to revolutionize the world, and so will Bill Gates. And you're looking at those guys like, there's no way that these 2 dudes are going to be able to compete. They probably should be in business together more so than anything else. And guess what? Apple and Microsoft are 2 of the biggest computational companies in the world. You got IBM and all those other guys. But why did that happen? Because somebody said, oh, you're crazy. No, I'll show you, right? I had an end state in mind that allowed them to get there.
Yeah, there's a concept I teach that really is from the collective body of knowledge of our company, is that I'll call it getting to know. And so the whole idea is, and this is another tagline I use, actually I've got an article that's going to be published sometime in the next few weeks where we're talking about this, is that a good problem statement will save your life, right? And I don't mean, hey, this will keep you from having to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and get shot. I mean, literally, you will not spend hours, days, weeks, months, years of your life solving a problem no one needs solved. And so what we teach people in class is you want to listen for people who tell you no. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit esoteric, but, remember that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And people will tell you yes just to get you out of their face. Yeah. The person who will tell you no, a lot of times cares enough to help you really understand what not to do and start to iterate and pivot and get to the right answer. So that's another example we give students when they come into class is, I'll get students who come into class and they're kind of nervous. I'm taking graduate level education from an R1 university and I'm bringing it to E6s, a couple of E4s. Got a great story for an E4 if we got time about it. I have 04s, 05s. I've got an 06 and a Dysel in class right now. But, so we span the spectrum. But the whole idea, the very first lesson I give them when they come in kind of nervous is called things that exist to be inventoried. And immediately they know exactly what to do, right? And it's the idea that everybody's got a Connex or a mill van full of stuff that sits in there turned exactly just so you can see the serial number. It's got a little metal band on it with the date for the last time it was open. And it's there and it only sees the light of day when it's time to be inventoried. And it's because no one uses it. Yeah. And so the thing that I teach that at the beginning to students, because I want you to understand there are some really intelligent, really dedicated people who thought that was a good idea. But we don't teach the skills in DoD to help you understand what's not a good idea.
Yeah.
We keep pushing the program forward, and then it ends up as a thing that exists to be inventoried, right? I mean, everybody wants to look for the bad guy. Who did this? Let's go get after him. There is no bad guy, but we're teaching skills that worked in the Industrial Revolution era, right? When you can have any color of Model T Ford you wanted, as long as it was black,
Yep.
right? That's the mentality we're still using in our linear processes. Whereas I'm just working with the CEO of Scrum.org. We're talking about how we bring our two ideas together. And the one thing that we all know is it's always iterative. Yeah. Things are always moving, always changing. And you gotta have a dynamic system to be able to adjust to it. That's what happens in the civilian.
Well, right? And the other part of it is that's what happens in combat too, right? So if you want to be a good strategist, right, you have to reiterate, you have to change your strategy as the conditions on the ground change. So perfect example is, and I'll use this as look at Iraq and Afghanistan. We did a surge in Iraq, then we did a surge in Afghanistan. Were those two ideal situations? No. That was just the easy button because we had kind of seen this campaign before. Sometimes the campaign is, hey, look, maybe we need to step back. Maybe we should put more troops in. Maybe we should pull people out. Don't know for sure what the 100% answer is, but hey, we're going to request 30,000 more soldiers and send them to Afghanistan. That's not going to get the result that you want, even though you got the result in Iraq. But, the thing that we were missing in Afghanistan was this little thing called the Anbar Awakening, right? The Anbar Awakening in Iraq is really what made the surge work, right? And that's so you have to account for all the conditions and reevaluate your strategy in a cyclical manner. And it's funny because when you say like, hey, there's these things that remain to get inventory, as soon as you open your mouth and you say, hey, there's things with, security bands on them in a Connex, I immediately go, okay, let's turn in this line of excess. Like that's what I think. And I always think, oh, that's a great job for my, my West Point lieutenant and my sharpest E4. Hey, you guys go turn this stuff in, right? Get rid of it. Because if it's not useful to the organization other than on an inventory sheet, then the innovative thinker is going to be like, well, how do I get rid of this so I save time, energy, and man hours to prevent from, cyclically checking this thing over and over again? Wow.
Yeah, you talk about how we do it right on the operational side. Operational Army, institutional Army. If you look at, come down from the terrific strategic examples you gave to the tactical. What's the operations process? Plan, prepare, execute, assess. Right? We never send somebody. We never tell people that. So an example of reconnaissance. So when I worked at the lab, I used to get frustrated that. Everyone wanted to know, tell me when that scientific research is going to turn into a capability, right? Well, you got to think about science like you do reconnaissance, right? I wrote an article called Research is Reconnaissance. And so part of that analogy is no one ever goes to the scout platoon and says, you cannot leave the FOB until you tell me when you're going to find the enemy, where you're going to find the enemy, what their constitution is going to be, and what we're going to be able to do about it. But that's exactly what we want to tell the scientists who are searching or doing research in quantum mechanics, right? And so we know how to do this on the operational side. Boyd's OODA loop. Yep. It's a loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, and act. And so getting more information and change. But when you look at how do we do this on the institutional side, milestone A, milestone B, milestone C.
Well, how many times have we seen the business flow chart? You know what I mean? Like, hey, we're going to start here. Here's your action plan. And action plans were great 20 years ago, and the environment has changed, and you have a whole bunch of tools that can help you make smarter decisions, right? I can collate with AI and eliminate half of the sitting around in a room that happens all the time. I could talk about this topic all day and twice on Sunday because this is a very much a passion point for me, but I have to cut this thing short, but we will get you back on because this is too good not to do again. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today, but if you could give us a quick rundown of something where we can find out more information about you and some of the programs, because I know you had mentioned your online classes that you had made available. So I definitely want to contact information and where we can find those classes, and we'll put those in the podcast description for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the methodology I teach is called H4X. The H4 is hacking for, and the X is whatever it needs to be. We started with hacking for defense, then we realized it was applicable in a much more broader area. So h4xtraining.bmnt.com. And that's where you'll see what I currently have going on. But again, I told you that, I'm a blacksmith. and I had people talking about, we had talking to the TSA, how do we pull 70,000 people off the line to get training? Right. Well, we've got ways to help them do that. So or an 8-week class or a 4-week class, or I just finished a 15-week class with the National Guard. So h4xtraining.bmnt.com. That's where our contact information is. You can see a little bit about what we're doing. And then that'll point you to NC State classes. It'll point you out to Cochise College out in Arizona. So we've got partners. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is that we don't do anything by ourselves, right? I'm really proud that when we're talking about democratizing innovation and entrepreneurship, we're doing it with people who care about our communities. That the Cochise folks, they care deeply about the Army Intel School that they're adjacent to. And North Carolina State University cares deeply about helping veterans in the state of North Carolina, around the state of North Carolina. And so that's why they give me kind of the rope to go out and do this. And just glad to have those partnerships, glad that we're able to do something useful. So hopefully we'll get some more people to come and take advantage of some of the things we're doing and get some of those junior officers, junior non-commissioned officers, particularly non-commissioned officers, to go out and learn how to lead the way in innovation. Because the last thing I'll tell you, right, is that Google figured this out a long time ago. You don't do what DoD does. You don't have somebody submit a problem into the silo back at the headquarters and solve it. You take the skills and you deploy them forward to the people who know the people who live where the problem is, and those are the people who solve it. And to this day, I think it's up to 20%. If you're a Google employee, you can make a pitch to have up to 20% of your paid time used for your idea. Wow. Solve the problem. That's how you got Gmail, right?
Well, and that's one of the things, and it's a big difference between conventional units and SOCOM, right? Fast and flat organizations. Like, look, I got a problem. I'm giving it to everybody. I'm not stovepiping it because, hey, guess what? It all impacts us the same. So let's come to a solution sooner rather than later. You see a lot of innovation theater that happens, like, oh, I'm going to stand on the stage and I'm going to talk in front of the screen and talk about innovation. And the first thing that we need to change is culture. And like, that drives me insane when I hear people say that, because I know that they're a charlatan at that point, because it's like, look, we've got to find out what the problem is. We've got to frame it, and then we've got to apply our skills to it. And if we don't have the right skills to accomplish the task, we've got to find somebody else that can help us get it done. And I think that's
it's a
go ahead.
Classic USASOC story or SOCOM story. So I was the first USASOC Science, U.S. Army Special Operations Command. I was the first Science and Technology Division Chief. So I actually didn't even work for USASOC at the time. I was assigned somewhere else, and I was a liaison there. But I had an idea about how USASOC could get more of the money that's in the lab. So I took one chart, I took it into the chief of staff, and I said, hey, look, there's $2.1 billion out there, and you're not getting any of it. Here's how you can do it. And he said, okay, you're in charge. They put me in charge of 12 operators and made me a supervisor. I wasn't even assigned to the command. So the point, that's not a story about me. That's a story about USASOC and the speed at which they make decisions and then expect performance. And so I couldn't agree with you more about that SOCOM model of empowering people to make those kind of decisions and move out is really what makes them a really powerful and unique organization.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap this thing up. We're definitely going to do a part 2. I really enjoyed talking to you, Bull. This was awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Bull Holland from BMNT, and this has been Rob Robinson for the Defense Technology Transition Office, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Defense Technology Talks, hosted by the North Carolina Defense Technology Transition Office, or DEFTECH. The views expressed in this broadcast are solely those of the individual contributors. As indicated, DEFTECH does not take responsibility for those statements or opinions and accepts no responsibility or liability for any inaccuracy or omissions reported during this program. The content and interviews are fair use for instructional purposes and to build awareness for the North Carolina innovation ecosystem. The full version of this presentation has been uploaded to our Mobilize platform. Mobilize is just another free service provided to you to access more national security and business collaboration opportunities. You can sign up for more information at deftech.nc.gov. Join us soon for the next podcast coming to a platform near you. DEFTECH is a subsidiary of the North Carolina Military Business Center and receives its support from Fayetteville Technical Community College.